Hello and welcome to the second quarter briefing for American Future. We've had some fantastic pilot project research results come in, and I'm going to share those with you. But first, I'm going to do just a brief recap of the overall project so that those who are seeing this for the first time understand what it is we're up to here at American Future. So this really was inspired by a need for and a place for everyday Americans to think about a future that they might want for themselves. Because in our culture, where we are right now, is that we continue to hear cries about the rise of authoritarianism and the end of democracy as we know it. We have states and the federal government vying for power, the southern border most notably. Right now, is little enthusiasm for the Biden and Trump rematch, and institutions are continuing to lose trust. So given this kind of like broad context, there's a lot more. This program itself is for Americans who feel aggrieved or enraged or hopeless about the state of our nation. And so they may have tuned out of civic life itself, like they're no longer contributing to the morass of bad things, but they're also not contributing to the repair. But they are willing to spend time thinking about their own personal future. And that is the right place that we're positioning American Future as a project. And part of this is because we really need to catalyze that can-do spirit that Americans have that makes us rather unique in the world. And we need to do that despite the fact that we have a fractured news environment, which means that we're not well informed unless we take tremendous effort to get out of our filter bubbles. We're more and more getting customized information through our digital devices, which keeps us, again, in these filter bubbles. And despite this macro level economic indicators continuing to improve, many Americans are not feeling that in their own personal budgets. They're still seeing higher prices. Life expectancy peaked in 2018 for people being born today, and it continues to decline. And our untreated mental health issues continue to grow. And the statistic I found most helpful on this slide really was that more than half of those who are impacted with mental health issues right now in America are untreated. And that's kind of like the headwinds, if you will, that we're approaching through this work. But our thesis continues to be that the way forward for the United States is for us to imagine and believe in a future that doesn't suck. Like right now, pie in the sky dreams are really not very believable. So we're just going for something that's like doesn't suck, like we might actually be okay. And it's good enough that it's going to be worth making a sacrifice now to get there to this preferred future. A little bit about me. I welcome you to look me up on LinkedIn. It's where I have a lot more detail, if you will. And part of what's happening in this moment of existential crisis is that science is actually showing us, neuroscience specifically, proving that if we spend even 5 minutes a day in awe and wonder about a possible future that we want, that we prefer, we will subconsciously begin to create that future. So where our media landscape right now is filled with dystopian narratives that kind of take over our minds, if we can replace those dystopian narratives with a preferred future that's worth it, we will subconsciously and with ease start to create that future. Doesn't mean it's all going to be roses, but it'll at least be, will counter some of those headwinds. Now, here's what's really new in this presentation today, and that is the research findings from the pilot project. I want to do a big shout out to Casey Henriquez at Ole Miss, who helped with this research analysis. And what we did, or what I did anyway, was I drove from Maryland to California and back, interviewing people on what I called the coffee shop tour. 48 people participated in this pilot project, and they were a very diverse group for 48 people. You'll see in phase 2 that we actually want to expand this, but just to give you an idea right now of who these folks are demographically. And with absolute certainty, I can say and assure everyone who's watching this, that 100% of our pilot project participants knew what they wanted for their future. And it included 3 elements in every interview that I conducted. The first was this desire for deeper connections with the people in their lives. The second was they wanted to belong in a community where they could be themselves. And the third was that they wanted to contribute back to people around them and know that their lives actually had meaning and purpose. They could make a difference. And I think these are really essential for us to think about as we're creating future narratives and as we're doing planning for future communities, that if we can include these 3 elements in our storytelling, it will make our resistance to change much lower and actually increase participation by the general public. So this is where we started the interview. We asked people a standard 8 questions. The first question was like, how far into your future do you want to imagine? And you can see that we almost had a perfect quintiles set here, but people were really imagining anywhere from 2 to 20 years. And then the very next question we asked was, is this going to be the same place where you live now? And this was a real even split, which I found interesting. I have no idea what it means, but I found it interesting that there could be a lot of people moving around, if you will, in the next few years. And this is where we get into like the real meat. The third question that we asked in the standard interview is, as you observe your future self, what are you most proud of? And this came back to the same 3 things that everyone wants in their preferred future, languaged a little bit differently, of course. But 27% of our respondents had some aspect of better, improved, maintained relationships with friends and family. 26% of our respondents also mentioned community impact, like they really wanted to make a difference in their community. 18% had some sort of ambitious deeds. These are goals that were more self-focused or things they were proud of for themselves, like graduating from college or becoming a lawyer or a pilot or getting elected to Congress. And so we broke it out from the community impact because the focus was on self instead of the community. And then 16% actually had personal goals that related to their self-care, such as their health, their inner peace, and 6% with spiritual life. And then there was a random smattering of other things that people were most proud of. But those were the big groupings. The next question that we asked was, how do you spend your average day? So looking again at your preferred self, how do you spend your time? And multiple responses were allowed for this. And again, people just talked this out about how they spent their day. 20% of folks said that they were going to do something in nature or they were going to exercise or get outside, but it had an element of nature connected to it. And then you can see the breakdown then, if we add it up to 100% here, people are going to spend an average day taking care of themselves, connecting with family and friends, being creative, spending time in their community, working here definitely included a sense of purpose and meaning. They're going to spend time with their spiritual practice and also relaxing. So this sounded like a really fun day to me. I hope you think so too, and you can see yourself there. Our next question really was about how do you feel in your preferred future? So like, what is your standard mood, if you will, and, around which your life is based? And as one would expect, as we're imagining preferred futures, actually people feel good and happy and joyful, peaceful even, and they feel grateful and optimistic and kinetic and connected, etc. And I found it interesting here that 3% of the answers in this category were people who feel a tremendous sense of anxiety and overwhelm today. And they really had trouble imagining a life without that anxiety and overwhelm. And so that was just something to keep in mind as we move forward. And again, pointing back to that mental health concern. So people were imagining themselves being mentally healthy. And a couple of people still said, yeah, but I'm not healed, if you will, yet. I'm not exactly healthy, but it's much improved. So then our Next question here really said, as you observe your future self, what do you observe as your priority values? And we asked for 3 to 5. Some people stopped at 3, some people went on to 6 or 7, but the average number that people gave us were 4 values, priority values they could identify in their future self. And the size of the words on this screen indicate the number of times that that word came up. So contribution was the number one value that people wanted, or that they were proud of about their, or try again. Contribution was the number one value people identified in their preferred future. Health, connection, integrity, family, faith, love. These were all like the primary values around which we can also start to think about what's next for us, and plan to have these values highlighted in our culture and have our culture based on those values rather than the profit or competition model that we have now. And then the last 2 questions of this interview really were about connecting our future preferred self to today. So the first question about what does your future community need to include or provide for your preferred future to be possible? And then the last one coming back to the present, what can you do now or in the near future to bring uh, this community, to build the community for your preferred life to exist? And this kind of gets back then to what is it that's worth wading through the crap for us to be willing to change, to sacrifice now. And everyone agreed in their different ways of communicating that their human dignity was really critically important no matter their life circumstances. Their communities needed to include, so they needed in their community a way for human dignity to be recognized. They wanted where they lived, and this didn't matter whether it was urban, suburban, or rural. They really wanted to be near others who were curious and open-minded and kind. Many people specifically said they wanted to live in a very diverse, richly diverse neighborhood. People also wanted to live near where their daily needs, such as food, shopping, and entertainment, were accessible and available easily. And there were a couple of people who said, yes, and transportation so that I don't have to have a car. So easy access to transportation. Everyone also, again, this was a recurring theme, wanted a way to give back to others. And then this last one was really about, there was so much relief about like thinking about this preferred future and having an agency to live their preferred life, just to know that it was possible, which in today's current society doesn't always feel possible to live our best life. So here's some things that we learned about the interview process itself, and then what is the research showing us? Well, there are common themes among everyday Americans, the 3 C's of connection, community, and contribution being the chief among them. People were really eager to have their stories published. I haven't had anyone say, no, don't publish my story, and just a couple of people who've preferred to not use their photograph and to remain anonymous. Affinity groups using the interview, we actually think this could be a community builder in 2024 prior to the election. And so that got moved from post-election use to pre-election use in phase 2. The interviews themselves are incredibly fun. But each live interview requires actually 3 to 4 hours to edit and publish the interview. So I've actually stopped taking one-on-one live interviews right now, unless it's for my podcast, Terrified Nation, which I'll get to in a minute. But the self-interview is available and people can still participate. So what is next? That is the question here. So moving into phase 2, we need to finalize this interview format in a way that people can use it on their own, and then offer multiple ways that people can input their future into the shared database. So one of the things that we're looking to do is find a partner who can help us develop a portal so people can do video entry, audio entry, and of course written, which is currently available. And then the next thing that we're working on in phase 2 is actually expanding the research pool to include up to 2,000 people that are broadly representative of the demographics of the United States. We're looking to do this also, we're looking to work in some place-based areas, specifically in that pre-election piece that I just mentioned, to see if we can't immunize counties that might be not immune currently from political violence, to help and see if we can't reward community members for being connected to each other and really focusing on those 3 Cs. And then affinity group outreach is also part of phase 2. And this is like faith communities or book clubs or family reunions, things like that, where people could actually take the interview or interview each other about their preferred future and then build a support group around that. So that's what we're currently focused on in phase 2. This is where, yes, we need to identify who these partners are. I already mentioned the 15 to 35 counties that are most at risk. We're also looking for referrals for this grassroots narrative to maybe be included or considered in academic research and issue-based work for future narratives. And then we're also looking at the bridging and reform organizations to see if they have any capacity right now or interest in trying this new approach to dialogue. And so those are who we think our good partners are going to be. Now, I have a volunteer who's actually in the process right now of helping me set up the research database for these 2,000 people to participate in. And so this is where we're going to, collect the stories from participants and then provide a little bit of analysis, such as this presentation, and deliver that to researchers and storytellers and artists. And the database itself, I'll share in the next quarterly update. It's pretty cool. So the last thing that I would say that we're looking at here for phase 2 is like, how do we share these stories widely? We have a volunteer who's working with us to create some different social media content, specifically using some short video clips. The Terrified Nation podcast has had a roaring start. As of the middle of March, we've had over 10,000 downloads in 2 months. More people have heard it on streaming, but we don't get those numbers. And Terrified Nation is the American Future interview, just to be clear, but we're taking it through what I call the fear-based door instead of the inspiration-based door, because some people are more motivated to listen to something through fear, and then giving them a reason to come back and have agency and actually decrease the fear level in the United States. So that's the podcast. And then we have some additional volunteer needs right now that we're looking for, which is an interview scheduler, especially for A-list people, because we're starting to make those invitations right now, referrals to narrative organizations. And we also need a funder, if you will, to help us build this research database. So after phase 2, this is a 5-phase project. And so just a reminder for those of you who've seen this before, that after phase 2, we actually want to start working post-election with some narrative sense making, and perhaps think about a documentary or a book to help share the story of the American future, not just this project, but really get it out into the public ethos. Phase 4 would be more community building then around what that new narrative is. And phase 5 would then be a launch, book release and research conclusion right around the semi-quincentennial of our nation, the 250th anniversary, excuse me, in 2026. So that's where we're headed on this project. And we're going to have some future partnership needs. Right now I outlined that we need some logistics, some partner outreach, media, user experience, researchers, storytellers. Those are folks we need right now. And then coming up, we're going to need additional partners, such as showrunners, more media, a publisher for a book, perhaps a documentarian, etc. And so if you have any of these partnership connections, we'd be happy to receive your referrals and/or financial support. And this is it. I'm really happy to know that you've watched this whole thing, and I really welcome you joining the team. And let's figure out the preferred future we can build together. Thank you.